The Empire of Byzantium, that golden dream. The climax of ancient Rome and Greece. One emperor, one single faith. A dream that lasted for 1,000 years. A dream shattered by the armies of the West. The fame of Byzantium travelled from Iceland to China, from Ethiopia to Russia, to every kingdom on the earth. And at its centre, Constantinople, the world's great marketplace. Its fabled wealth, its gold, its emeralds, its palaces, its glittering churches. A legend so rich it caused its own destruction. Founded in the year 330, the Christian Empire of Byzantium had its centre here, in Istanbul, in modern Turkey. The Byzantines called this city Constantinople. 1,000 years ago, it was the richest city of them all, the eye of all the world. In the very centre, the ancient church of St. Sophia, converted now into a mosque. Here, the emperors of Byzantium met the King of Heaven, the lords of this world and the next, the centre of the Christian universe. Visions of this holy city and its golden emperors filled the mind and the imagination of every medieval prince and king until one day, an army of the Christian West came here and destroyed it. Beside the church, above the sea, a shadowed park with 5 centuries of buildings in it, the Palace of Byzantium. A 1,000 years ago, there were gold pavilions here, chapels, mansions, set in a sea of green. An earthly paradise. One of the most potent ancient legends of our planet, the home of God's emperor on earth. So where is the Holy Palace of Byzantium in modern Istanbul? That's a lump of it there. That sad, pathetic pile of brick. You have to go into the streets, into the alleyways. You really need a map. Look, I'll show you. Modern Istanbul. Why the map's always open the wrong way? Modern Istanbul, ancient Constantinople. I'll show you what I mean. Look, there's the great Roman roads coming into the centre of town, the hippodrome where the people met the emperor, the great church just beside it. And there, between that wall and that one there, that whole area was all palace. Dozens of buildings, dozens of churches, all together, high and glittering right across the hill. So you might ask, where the hell is it now? The Golden Palace is buried beneath old Istanbul. The little streets are haunted by its lost pavilions, by ghosts of ancient gardens, by the shadows of its courtiers and generals. The enormous curve of the imperial racetrack still stands though, a shattered wonder of the medieval world. We're right at the very heart of the palace of Imperial Byzantium, and there's a corner shop. Well, at least you could say the Byzantines invented corner shops. They had a law about them. There should be one in every street, they said, for the necessities of life. That there, though, that's something else. That's a part of the palace itself. Just part of the foundations, though. Once they held a great high terrace, not that tea house up there, where the emperors walked each evening in the fading light, their fine silks flowing gently in the fresh sea breezes. Constantinople was the greatest seaport in the medieval world. Arab, Russian, Viking and Italian boats once sailed along these walls. This is the ruin of an imperial pavilion, some 14 centuries old. The warm sea once splashed against these walls. Those are the doors through which the emperor once walked to board the royal yacht, the Greyhound. The emperors like to live beside the seaside, so it's always a good idea to, when you're walking along the seaside walls of Constantinople, to look and see if these little gates give you something of the entrance to the palace. Some of them don't look much today, but they're very interesting. See this Greek text? It's part of a Greek version of the book of Habakkuk, a text we know once was laid around the base of a great statue of the Emperor Justinian that stood in the centre of the city. So this, then, is not an ancient gateway, because that statue was still standing a few hundred years ago. Where on earth can we find the picture of the Palace of Byzantium? It's still here, of course, in its imitations, in echoes of the great palace of Constantinople that stand in Sicily and Spain, in Syria and Rome. Villas, gardens and verandas, all set like tents across the hill. Scented courtyards, splashing fountains, a world that ordinary people never saw. Some of their very stones were plundered from the golden palace of Byzantium. There were churches too, filled with the holiest of relics. Fragments of the true cross set in gold and blood-red rubies. And great jewelled cups made for the emperor's own communion. And at the heart, at the very centre of this magic palace, Byzantium's throne room, the throne room of the Emperor of Christendom. As you approach the imperial throne of Byzantium, you'd have felt as naked as a man on Judgment Day, utterly defenceless. The man who sat on that chair didn't rule by the will of God. He was the will of God on earth. He was God's instrument. He was divine providence personified. Some Byzantines believed that the end of world history would come when that man on that throne took his crown off and laid it on the rock of Calvary. It's probably the most total form of government the world has ever seen. You don't have, for example, participatory government in this. Who can participate in the will of God? You can only bow before it. You can't have morality or loyalty. You can't have good kings or bad kings, because who can know the workings of the will of this astonishing emperor? That is Byzantine politics. Byzantium
ruled with cosmic certainty. It didn't dominate its neighbours with vast armies, but with images of God and government, with bars of gold and promises of princesses in marriage and alliance, all dressed up in the silk robes of Byzantium. The Byzantines operated a kind of cultural imperialism, and at the centre of the show was Constantinople, the Golden Palace and its emperor, the rituals of its church and court. In the 10th century, diplomats and merchants, Easterners and Westerners, all give astonishing descriptions of a weekly procession that wound through the cloisters and the gardens of the palace, all filled with singing choirs, and ran up to the great church of St. Sophia. Behold the morning star, they sang, as the emperor approached. In his eyes the sun's rays are reflected. Adore him, ye nations, bow the neck to his greatness. The whole world agreed that this was the most magnificent, the most awe-inspiring sight on earth. At its ending, the procession passed up a wooden walkway that ran right up to the gallery of the great church and entered St. Sophia through this door. Here, high up in the gallery of St. Sophia, was the chapel of the emperors and the court. Below the balcony, in the incense and darkness of the ancient church, pilgrims from Asia, Africa and Europe visited and kissed 1,000 holy relics, a little holy land of marble, gold and bronze. In this smaller private space above, the emperors held courtly services and were enrobed for the vast ceremonials that took place each week in the church below. And here they are still, the dynasties of old Byzantium, still walking in the grand procession from 1,000 years ago.
That's the Emperor John the Good up there, all decked out in his Sunday best and carrying a bag of gold for the church. He was a good king. He was from the Commagene family. It was a noble dynasty, died out in 1185. That's his wife, Irene. She was a Hungarian princess. See, she's got blonde hair. And that poor little weedy chap round the corner is their son Alexis. John desperately wanted him to succeed to the throne, but he died young. That person there is the most celebrated, most married monarch of the Macedonian dynasty, the Empress Zoe. Zoe ruled Byzantium in her own right in the 1050s. But Zoe also had royal blood in her veins, and she legitimized 3 successive husbands as emperors. That's the last of them, the pious Constantine IX. If you look closely, you can see that the head of that figure's been changed. I bet there were portraits of her other 2 husbands underneath. Now, the funny thing about this mosaic is that Zoe's portrait's been changed along with her husband's too. You know, some historians have said that she was very vain. Certainly she was beloved of the people of Constantinople, who thought her very beautiful. And you know, she was almost 60 when that portrait was made.